Throughout 2023, the implementation of the recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry continued with various reports. Let's take a detailed look at the various reports, recommendations, and of course, the implementations of the Commission of Inquiry report. Throughout 2023, the implementation of the recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry continued with various reports. Let's take a detailed look at the various reports, reforms, and implementations. In January 2023, the completion of actions under recommendations B2 and B3, which covered making the registration of interest for the House of Assembly public, was submitted. The completion of B35 brought the revised Public Service Transformation Program completely on stream. B37 was also completed with streamlined public service training and resulted in an agreement between the government of the Virgin Islands and the H. Lavely Stout Community College to prepare a memorandum of understanding to support the implementation of the Public Service Learning Institute. In February, the independent and audit reports that had been completed thus far were advanced through Cabinet so that they could be laid on the table of the House of Assembly, following which individual ministries would determine, after intra-governmental and public consultation, what recommendations would be carried forward to address reform issues. Cabinet then approved the new protocol for appointing and removing members of statutory boards. In March, the government published its new protocol for the appointment and removal of statutory board members. Reviewer Anthea Smith submitted her comprehensive report on discretionary powers held by elected officials to the governor and premier. Cabinet accepted the review and referred it back to the relevant ministry for policy legislative drafting work to begin. Reviewer Deniston Fraser submitted his completed review on the practice of House of Assembly members contracting with the government. The Deputy Governor's Office launched the Public Service Management Code, which then underwent a trial period, after which the Public Service Management Act was drafted accordingly. In April, the Auditor General submitted her audit of all grants for residency and belongship status under the Fast Track Scheme, COI Recommendation B34. The following independent reviews and audits were laid on the table of the House of Assembly and thereby made public. Internal Audit Department, the Clear Path to Regularization, Residency and Belonger Status Program, also known as the Fast Track Program, Audit Report, COI Recommendation B34. The Government of the Virgin Islands Protocol for the Appointment and Removal of Statutory Board Members, COI Recommendation B28. Statutory Board Reviews by Jamal S. Smith, COI Recommendation B25. Report on Investigation into Statutory Boards by Sheila N. Brathwaite, COI Recommendation B29. Report on the Discretionary Powers held by elected officials by Anthea Smith, COI Recommendation A3. Virgin Islands Crown Lands Distribution Policy Review Report by David Abendigo, COI Recommendation B30. In May, the focus shifted to cross-collaboration and beginning the process of creating policy and making deeper, reformative changes from the reports and audits that had been submitted thus far, as well as transitioning work to the new ministries and colleagues who had not been involved in the process previously. In June, one review, B24 Statutory Board Overall Governance, was completed and submitted to the Premier and the Governor by Ms. Antoinette Skelton. Its recommendations would be considered and integrated in the new statutory board policy that is being completed. The implementation focus continued to be on cross-collaboration and creating policy to make deeper reformative changes from the report and audits that had been submitted. In July, the review considering the issuance of belongship and residency status B33.1 was completed. The Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sustainable Development began the process of taking the recommendations made in the review forward. After Cabinet accepted the review and it was laid on the table of the House of Assembly, the ministry intended to work with the Immigration Department and other relevant ministries and departments to finalize the new belongship and residence policy with a thorough period of public consultation. In August, the Auditor General submitted a full audit of all disposals of Crown land, whether outright or by lease, over the previous 3 years. This marked the completion of Action B31.1. Public consultation was carried out in the area of assistance grants, both as the social assistance grants and the educational assistance grants systems are being overhauled by the Ministries of Health and Social Development and Education, Youth Affairs, Sports, respectively. In September, public and other consultations were carried out in the following areas: social assistance grants B7 by the Ministry of Health and Social Development, educational assistance grants B11 by the Ministry of Education, Youth Affairs and Sports, the process of granting belonger and resident status B33 by the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sustainable Development, Crown Land Disposal B30 by the Ministry of Environment, Natural Resources and Climate Change. Cabinet approved the COI Implementation Plan, formally approving the tools and procedures being used for COI recommendation implementation, tracking, and reporting. In October, public and other consultations continued in the following areas: social assistance grants B7 by the Ministry of Health and Social Development, educational assistance grants B11 by the Ministry of Education, Youth Affairs and Sports, the process of granting belonger and resident status B33 by the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sustainable Development, Crown Land Disposal B30 by the Ministry of Environment, Natural Resources and Climate Change. The House of Assembly held an informal meeting to fully understand the implications of the changes to the Public Registrar of Interest and gave their formal input on how reform would be most effective in this area. In November, the Constitutional Review Commission submitted its report to the Governor and Premier. Consultations continued in the following area: assistance grants, educational assistance grants, the process of granting belonger and residency status, Crown Land Disposal. And finally, in December, the Registrar of Interest, Ms. Phyllis Evans, was appointed. The government of the Virgin Islands has appointed Ms. Phyllis Evans as the new Registrar of Interest. Her appointment took effective November 1st, 2023. Ms. Evans brings an extensive and accomplished history in the public service with over 14 years as the Clerk of the House of Assembly. As a registrar, Ms. Evans will document the financial interests and liabilities of elected House of Assembly members and serve as clerk to the Standing Select Committee as mandated under the Registrar of Interest Act 2006 and 2021 amendments. The implementation of recommendations will continue. The government of the Virgin Islands has asked for extensions, which have been granted. However, the deadline for full implementation remains May of 2024. Governor Rankin has expressed dissatisfaction on the many occasions as the timeliness of the progress, with the government of the Virgin Islands continually stressing that the implementation of the recommendations have placed an immense burden on the civil service. To date, 25 of the 50 recommendations have been fully completed, exactly at a 50% mark. 80 of 131 actions have been completed at a 61% mark. Now guys, the Commission of Inquiry has been what some would deem a thorn in our flesh. It has been a groundbreaking a scene of events where recommendations have to essentially be implemented by May of 2024. At this moment, we are at a 50% completion.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a 61% rate of actions, which are essentially the same, but they're taking it in stages. Despite the government of the Virgin Islands saying, you know, it's been a strain on the civil service and the workers, you have the governor who's essentially saying, I'm not necessarily pleased, and he said that multiple times, I'm not pleased with the progress. So I think going into 2024, particularly to meeting that very stiff timeline, is something that we as a territory, we have to essentially pay very, very close attention to.
Now, you mentioned the governor. Of course, we're wishing him a happy retirement because this is the end of his diplomatic service. But with the new governor coming in, a lot of people are concerned as to what that could mean for the COI implementations. Governor Rankin, of course, has said, like you mentioned, that he's not too pleased
with the progress,
timelines, and with repeated reports still having the exact same number of reforms completed. So we're really anxious to see what the new governor is going to have to say.
And that is a really good point, because we have to see what his agenda is as well. With the Order in Council still dangling over the territory's head, you know, what happens if those recommendations are not fully implemented come the end of May?
And we're still looking forward to Governor Rankin's final gift to the territory, his final quarterly report.
You call it a gift. I hope it's a gift.
Now, moving right along, like Kamal would have mentioned, there have been significant developments in the drug smuggling and money laundering case involving former Premier Andrew Fahie throughout 2023. Of course, we would not have seen him go to trial yet, but we would have seen at least one of his co-conspirators being sentenced.
Yes, indeed, and we wait in 2024 as well to see the other sentence as well.
Absolutely, and it was a major turn to see that now his co-conspirator joins the prosecution as part of the trial. He is yet to begin, but let's check out the details. Continued delays have characterized Fahie's anticipated advance to the courtroom, with a third delay granted this year, pushing his trial to a scheduled date of January 8, 2024. Following Fahie's arrest on April 28, 2022, he initially was scheduled to face trial starting July 18, 2022, alongside former BVI Ports Authority Managing Director Olivine Maynard and her son Kadeem Maynard, who are also accused of taking part in the cocaine trafficking conspiracy. But that month, the court agreed to the defendants' unopposed request to schedule to January 17th to give them more time to prepare. Last November, Fahie requested a second extension, noting that the November 9th superseding indictment against him and Miss Maynard added a new count: interstate and foreign travel in aid of racketeering. In addition to the three they were already facing along with Kadeem Maynard: conspiracy to import a controlled substance, conspiracy to engage in money laundering, and attempted money laundering. In part because of the new charge, his lawyer argued that Fahie needed additional time to prepare. In an unexpected turn of events to many, we learned in May 2023 of the intention of Fahie's co-defendants Olivine Maynard and Kadeem Maynard to enter into plea agreements. It became a reality in June when they both chose to plead guilty to one count of conspiracy to import cocaine at a federal court in Miami in exchange for a more lenient sentencing. As part of their plea agreements, Olivine and Kadeem Maynard promised to, quote, cooperate fully, end quote, with U.S. authorities and provide, quote, truthful information, end quote, about their co-conspirators. They also agreed to forfeit any assets or proceedings derived from their criminal activities. A key factor of those proceedings is that the Maynards signed off on an account of events that unfolded detailing their dealings with an individual who they believed at the time was a member of the Mexican Sinaloa cartel, and how they established the link with the former premier Andrew Fahie to facilitate the passage of cocaine through the Virgin Islands for a share of the profits. The Maynards also signed off on a factual proofer which stated that between May 16, 2022 and April 28, 2022, they both, along with Premier Fahie, conspired with each other and the purported cartel member, who was in fact an undercover DEA agent, to ship thousands of kilograms of cocaine through Tortola to the United States. Activities during that time included several meetings with the purported cartel member, agreeing to plans to hold loads of 3,000 kilograms of cocaine in Tortola until it could be shipped to Puerto Rico and the US mainland, and deciding to bribe other public officers for furtherance of the scheme. The Maynard sentences were initially scheduled for August 21, 2023, but were later rescheduled. While Olivine Maynard's sentencing won't come until the new year, Kadeem Maynard was sentenced to serve 57 months in prison during a hearing in November. Now, of course, everyone's eyes and ears are locked into this trial in January. That's going to be the biggest conversation going on in news. Honestly, I can't say that because the Virgin Islands is somewhere where the pot is always bubbling. So we don't know what's going to happen next. But as of right now, that one is on the top of the list.
Interesting.
Yeah, and indeed, because we do know a lot of persons, obviously still supporting the former premier, very strongly. We would have seen this year initiative was launched to raise some funds for him, and
we were yet to know how much money was raised,
but I'm sure a lot based off what I would have seen in terms of feedback from that initiative. So it also goes to show that despite his circumstance, innocent until proven guilty, the people, the community, especially the members of the first district, continues to rally around the former premier.
Well, you mentioned a good point: innocent until proven guilty. Of course, we have a little bit of a difference here in the Virgin Islands, and by that I simply mean that sometimes you are not necessarily given the opportunity, and the circumstances as they surround former premier still will have his day in court. He still has his ability with his attorneys to essentially prove his case. But I want to say something about this case, and I'll be very frank and honest. It's been almost April of 2024 is going to be almost 2 years since we broke the story. And for the sake of the people of the Virgin Islands, for the sake of our territory, I truly hope that at some point within the near future, we could move forward. Verdict, be it in favor, it doesn't matter. I just hope that we could move forward as a country as a people, and of course, wish the former premier and his family the very best.
Indeed. And you know, there's so many different, in terms of, depends on how this case is tried and the verdict is returned. There's so many things that can happen in 2024 because, you know, what if he gets a not guilty verdict, comes back to him, now he returns to the territory? What will we see in terms of politics? You know, so much in the bag when it comes to that particular case that I'm sure every single one in the territory, as you said, will be keeping a keen eye to see how this trial goes.